Hi everyone, this is Wonton back with a quick Prot Paladin guide for the 7.0 pre-patch. I'll do a separate full guide for Legion once that launches of course, but some people have been asking, hey, how do I play Prot Paladin now, the class has changed so much, and I don't just want to leave those people hanging, so here we go. The 7.0 update brought with it a pretty big redesign, with changes to pretty much every part of the existing class. Although in some ways, despite the huge number of changes, the class kinda ended up the same, so don't be afraid that, they completely ruined the class and Paladins play like DKs now. No, not really. I'd say the class will definitely feel familiar to you if you played in Mists or Warlords. So, let's get started by talking about how our new active mitigation works. The biggest change for Prot Paladins is the removal of Holy Power, something we've had for 3 expansions now. Instead of costing Holy Power, Shield of the Righteous is now on a charge system. You can store up to 3 charges, and it has a 16-second recharge, which is reduced by haste. However, the duration of the Shield of the Righteous buff has been increased from 3 to 4.5 seconds, and the buff now reduces all damage, not just physical. So overall, Shield of the Righteous has been made much stronger, but we don't get to use it nearly as much. If, like me, you played a lot of Prot Paladin in the last 2 expansions, you're gonna have to break the habit of just pressing that button all the time and actually think about your uses the same way you would think about using a short defensive cooldown. Since Holy Power is gone, we also have a new replacement for Word of Glory, called Light of the Protector. This spell is still off the global cooldown, has a 15-second cooldown reduced by haste, and heals you for 25% of your missing health. This means it's a much weaker heal overall, only useful in really dire emergencies, and even then, it won't heal you that much. Save this for when your health dips, to buy your healers a second or 2 to heal you up, but don't expect it to do very much. Okay, so that's your active mitigation. Now let's talk about your new rotation. Your rotation in 7.0 is based on the following priority: Judgment, Blessed Hammer, if you have that talented, Avenger Shield, Consecration, and then Hammer of the Righteous. The interesting thing is that each of these has a different defensive benefit now, meaning that even though Holy Power is gone, performing a good rotation is still very important for a Prot Paladin. Judgment reduces the cooldown of Shield of the Righteous each time you use it, which is why it's your top priority. Blessed Hammer will be covered in the talent section later, but it's your second priority just below Judgment. Avenger's Shield gives you an absorb for 20% of the damage done once you have your artifact weapon in Legion, or if you have your Hellfire Citadel 2-piece, it also gives you an absorb there. Consecration is an interesting one. Standing in your Consecration actually makes your Shield of the Righteous and Light of the Protector 20% stronger. This does update dynamically, so you don't need to worry about snapshotting a stronger Shield of the Righteous buff or anything like that. Hammer of the Righteous is now single target, but becomes AoE when you're standing in Consecration. It now has 2 charges, and as before, it has a 15% chance to trigger Grand Crusader, which resets the cooldown on Avenger's Shield. I've updated my weak auras for 7.0 to reflect the new rotation, and I'll have a link in the description if you want to import those weak auras for yourself. Let's also talk about some other basic abilities that have changed. Your shields are gone, your buffs are gone, hands have been renamed to blessings, and salvation is now a talent. In what was probably the most painful change, Divine Protection has been removed. We will get a similar 1-minute cooldown from our artifact in Legion, but right now we don't have any short cooldowns, which kinda sucks, and also makes your Shield of the Righteous usage even more important. Divine Shield no longer cuts your damage in half, which is nice. And finally, we have a shiny new speed boost called Divine Steed, which lets us mount for 3 seconds, increasing our speed to 220%, although for some infuriating reason it's on the global cooldown. A few other spells had their cooldowns change, but for the most part everything remains the same. So that's our basic abilities out of the way, and let's move on to talents. Tier 15 is mostly a choice between Blessed Hammer and Holy Shield. Holy Shield's basically the same as before, so use this anywhere where there's lots of magic damage, especially if that damage is a dot or an aura, something that ticks every couple seconds. Blessed Hammer is a very strong choice for DPS and reducing physical damage, which makes it kind of the go-to in this tier. This is a very unique spell that replaces Hammer of the Righteous. It has 3 charges, and it makes a hammer spiral out from you to about 10 yards. It does 2 full rotations of your character, it can hit the same enemy multiple times, and each time it hits, it applies a debuff that makes the enemy deal 15% less damage to you on their next auto attack. Given that it has such a low cooldown, multiple charges, and each cast can hit every enemy around you 2 or 3 times, you can reduce most incoming hits by 15%. As if that wasn't enough, this spell also does really good AoE damage, which makes it kind of the go-to talent in this tier. Put it second in your rotation, just below Judgment in priority. Of course, since it has charges, I find it smart in certain situations to use Avenger's Shield or Consecration before Blessed Hammer, if Blessed Hammer only has 1 charge for example. Tier 30, Bastion of Light is kind of the go-to right now, as it's a pretty strong offensive and defensive cooldown that fills more or less the same role Holy Avenger used to have. First Avenger will probably be a decent option on single target fights once we have our artifact, but for now it's kinda pointless. 45 is a CC tier. The cool thing here is that Blinding Light is now much better than it used to be. First of all, it just does a lot of damage on AoE. Second of all, it's an AoE interrupt on a 1.5 minute cooldown. Third, it no longer breaks from holy damage, which nearly all your damage is. This won't matter much in dungeons or raids because somebody else in your party will break it, but it has some interesting uses in soloing and PvP. 60. Well, these two are garbage, but Blessing of Spellwarding is really cool and also something no other spec in the game can do. Since pretty much every dungeon and raid mechanic that isn't directed at tanks deals magic damage, this is pretty much like giving an ally a divine shield for 10 seconds. Basically, if you raided on Warlords, you probably know a lot of fights involved cheese of some kind, like an ability that had to be soaked by a Hunter Deterrence or a Mage Ice Block, that sort of thing. Well, now you can give any ally the ability to do that, which can open up a lot of interesting strategies. Or you can just put it on an ally that's standing in fire and is dying to magic damage or something like that. Do be aware that, like the bop it replaces, this still drops threats, so don't just put it on yourself because the boss is gonna run away and kill someone else. 75, I absolutely love Final Stand. I used to joke that every time you use Lay on Hands, a warrior rerolls to Paladin somewhere because it's such a good panic button. Well, now there's a better one in Final Stand, which buys you 8 seconds of breathing room in basically any situation. We've all had those moments where everything is going to shit and you're out of cooldowns and you're about to die. Well, now you have Final Stand for those moments. This talent is going to be amazing in Mythic Plus dungeons. I can't wait to use it. Of course, Knight Templar is also decent, but until Divine Steed is off the global cooldown, I don't really think I'll be using it very much. Tier 90's kinda shitty, unfortunately. It's like they wanted to give us raid utility, but then they were worried we'd step on the healer's toes, so they backpedaled completely and made all these really weak. Aegis of Light is really cool in theory, but it's channeled so you can't move, and only affects allies that are behind you, but no more than 10 feet behind you, and for all those restrictions you get 6 seconds of this on a 5-minute cooldown? Cool idea, but just too limited in its current state. The other two options are just both boring healing passives, but Judgment of Light generally does more healing, so just take that one. Finally, Tier 100. Last Defender is a very safe choice to default to here, and becomes quite strong anytime there's multiple targets. If you're a player still learning the class, it's a very safe option to default to. Righteous Protector will probably be what we use on single target raid bosses, where Last Defender wouldn't be as impressive. And Seraphim is now the glass cannon DPS option, more or less. Consuming 2 charges of Shield of the Righteous means losing 9 seconds of 40 to 50% damage reduction, which is like losing a full Guardian of Ancient Kings, and instead you get a little bit of stats. Now, technically these stats all give you a little bit of defense too, but overall, using Seraphim is definitely a survivability loss, where the trade-off is that you get a DPS gain. If you're very confident on the class, or just massively overgear the content you're doing, give it a try, because it's pretty fun to use. But if you're having trouble staying alive, then switching Seraphim to something else should be the first change you make. When it comes to stats and gearing, I'm not going to talk about this very much because it's the pre-patch. It really doesn't matter, all this gear is going to be useless in 4 weeks anyway. But what it's looking like is that for survivability, versatility will be our top stat, then haste and mastery, then crit. While for DPS, crit will be our top stat, then haste and mastery, then versatility. So a balanced build will probably mostly get haste and mastery because it's good for both of those, and versatility if you want to survive more. Of course, the giant disclaimer there is that all of these stat priorities could change as we get buffs or nerfs, or as we get more data for simulations, or just more experience playing this new redesigned class. So check back for the Legion guide where I'll have some more concrete information for you regarding stats. Finally, I have a new updated set of weak auras for Legion, including this fantastic Shield of the Righteous weak aura from UI. This shows you the 4 spells in your basic rotation, not strictly in order of priority since technically Blessed Hammer should be to the right of Judgment, but I've been playing with Crusader Strike bound to 1 and Judgment bound to 2 for so long that this made sense to me. It also shows you all your cooldowns and gives you progress bars for when they're active. Finally, the Shield of the Righteous weak aura is functionally very similar to the old Holy Power bar, and very easy to see out of the corner of your eye, which allows you to do your rotation while staying aware of what's going on around you. If you're interested in getting this for your own UI, just download the add-on called Weak Auras 2, and then use the import option to copy the strings I've linked in the description. Building a better UI is honestly about 50% of becoming a better WoW player, so if you don't use weak auras at the moment, don't be afraid to try it out. That concludes my 7.0 Prot Paladin guide. I'll put out another more detailed guide once Legion launches, so if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the comments. Thanks for watching.